We need a little more. Distant starlight really is not a problem for a young universe. What I'm talking about here is the fact that we can see these galaxies that are billions of light years away. And when I use the term light year, that is a unit of distance, not time. A light year is about 6 trillion miles, okay? And so when I say the universe is billions of light years in size, that just means it's really big. It doesn't mean it's old. People hear the word year in there and they think that, well, doesn't it have something to do with time? Well, a light year is the distance that light under normal circumstances would travel in 1 year. And so you'd think if these galaxies are billions of light years away, that it would take light, billions of years to get from there to here. And obviously the light has got from there to here because we see them. And so doesn't that prove the universe is billions of years old? And this has come to be called the distant starlight problem. But I want to give you what I think is a solution to this. There's actually a number of different ways to resolve it, which is interesting. And of course, God has access to solutions that we might not have even thought of or even considered. He's not bound by laws of nature as we are. But I do want to point out that some of the proposed solutions really don't work. And I mention this because sometimes people will come up and say, well, have you thought of this? And yeah, we've thought of that. And there's a reason it doesn't work. Some of the simpler solutions that people think of really have been investigated and they don't pan out. The idea that the distances aren't real, maybe the galaxies are all within 6,000 light years, it's not realistic. Even our own galaxy isn't within that distance. These distances, I won't go into all the details, but there's good science to support the fact that these are at incredible distances. The idea the speed of light was much faster in the past, I think that was very worthy of consideration. I'm glad that they looked into that, but I think there's compelling evidence that it was not faster in the past. The speed of light is linked into other properties in nature. It sets the relationship between, for example, between electric fields and magnetic fields. It sets the relationship between energy and mass. And so if you tinker with the speed of light very much in vacuum, it might not even make atoms possible. So we like the speed of light the way it is. Light was created in transit is one that I want to spend a little more time showing you why I don't believe that's a good idea for starlight. People have pointed out, well, the universe was made mature in the sense it was functional. Adam was made as an adult. He didn't have to grow up from a baby. And if you assume he grew up from a baby, you'd conclude the wrong age by looking at him. And that's true. That's certainly true. And so people have said, couldn't starlight be that way? Couldn't it be that God made the beams of light, the star, connecting the star to the earth? I think not. And the reason is because it would require God to create fictional images and movies. And I want to show you what I mean by this. Here we have supernova 1987A. There was a star in one of the Magellanic Clouds, and that little star right there in 1987 decided to blow itself to bits. Very sad, but it's a supernova. And so that star blew up. Now this star is in one of the Magellanic Clouds. It's over 100,000 light years away, let's say 170,000 light years away, something like that. And today, it looks like that. We see expanding star guts, what's left of the star expanding off into space. Now, if you say, well, when did that happen? Now, the secularists would say, well, 170,000 years ago, and the light just got here in 1987. And if you say, well, no, the reason we're able to see that is because God made the beam of light already on its way. When did this happen? Well, if you believe in light in transit, this didn't happen. It was just a picture that God made in a beam of light about 6,000 light years out that finally reached the Earth in 1987. If you believe in light in transit, this star never existed, that explosion never happened, and by the way, this doesn't exist either. These are just pictures that God put in a beam of light. And that really bothers me. It's not that I don't think that God has the power to do that. Of course he has the power to do that. The question is it consistent with his nature to do something like that? And I don't think it is. And I don't think God would create light with fictional information in it, as it were. And if you say, well, I don't know, I think he might, be careful, because how do you know I'm here right now, right? I mean, how do you know God isn't making the light 1 inch away from your eye, an image of me? Well, we hear you too, no problem. God made the sound 1 inch away from your ear. No, I don't think that God makes fictional pictures for us. So if light in transit is true, then none of these things have ever actually existed. But we do see these things. And I think there's a better answer anyway. One of the ones that I thought was a little more plausible, I think it's not the right answer, but I want to mention it because at least it deserves consideration. Dr. Russ Humphreys has pointed out that time can flow at different rates under different circumstances. Einstein discovered that. And Humphreys says, well, maybe that's the solution to starlight. Maybe that clocks on Earth tick slower than clocks in the universe. And I've chatted with him about this. It's an interesting model. I haven't seen the math work out in a way that actually solves distant starlight, though, but he continues to work on it, and it's interesting. I'm going to suggest that the solution may involve, I'm going to give you what I think the answer is. I think it involves the one-way speed of light, and that is the speed of light on a one-way trip as opposed to bouncing off a mirror, a two-way trip. The speed of light in vacuum is 186,282 miles per second, very fast. But that is a round-trip average speed. And what I mean by that is if we wanted to measure the speed of light, here's how we could do it in principle. We could build a very long hallway, okay, 186,000 miles long. We'll pretend we have government funding so we can waste it that way, okay? And we'll put it out there. And so I'm going to stand over here on this end with my flashlight. I'll have a mirror at the other end, or another flashlight, either would work. And what I'm going to do is when the clock strikes noon, I'm going to turn on the flashlight for just an instant, send that pulse out, and it'll reflect back. And as soon as I see the reflection, I'm going to look at the clock and see how much time has elapsed. And if we were to do this, we would find it takes 2 seconds for light to go out and come back. And so it's traveled a distance of 186,282 miles twice, and it's taken 2 seconds to do that. So the average speed is 186,282 miles per second. That's how you get the speed of light, and that's what we would find. Most people assume that it took 1 second to go out and 1 second to come back. But we don't actually know that, do we? All we know is the total time is 2 seconds. It could be, hypothetically, the case that the light zips out and takes all of 2 seconds. Maybe it takes no time at all for it to get out there, and then it takes all of 2 seconds to get back. That's a possibility. Or maybe it's the reverse. Maybe it takes all of 2 seconds to travel out there, and then it zips back instantaneously. And people have said, well, why? Is the mirror affecting it? No, it doesn't have to be the mirror. You could even use another flashlight out there. And when your buddy sees the beam, he turns on the return trip. It could just be that the nature of space is such that light propagates at a different speed this way than it does that way. You'd say, why would it be that way? Well, there are certain crystals that do that, where the speed of light's very different in one direction than another. And it could be that the vacuum of space is like that. The point is, we don't know. And you see where I'm going with this, because if this is the case, if light, when it's moving away from me, is slower, and when it moves toward me, it's much quicker than the average speed, that would solve the distant starlight problem, wouldn't it? Because I don't have to send light out to the galaxies and reflect it back. It only has to make a one-way trip. It only has to go from there to here. But so I'm hoping that this will be the case, but hoping for something doesn't make it so. We want to see if we can do an experiment to measure the one-way speed of light. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to measure the speed of light just on a one-way trip and not a round trip? Well, you can't use a mirror anymore. Instead, you got to use 2 clocks.